control panel network to open the network dialog box, which lists all of the currently installed network components. Click Add to open the selected network components type dialog box. Select protocol from the list of network components and click Add to open the selected network protocols dialog box. The dialog box lists the various software manufacturers and their respective networking protocols. Select Microsoft from the list of manufacturers. Select TCP/IP from the networking protocols and click OK to continue. When you click OK, Windows installs the Microsoft TCP/IP protocol and displays it in the list of networking components in the network dialog box. Clicking OK completes the installation and the system prompts you to restart the computer so the changes can take effect. TCP/IP properties. Many configuration settings are associated with TCP/IP. To look at or change them, follow these steps. Choose Start, Settings, Control Panel, Network to open the network dialog box. Select TCP/IP and click the Properties button to open the TCP/IP Properties dialog box. Across the top of the TCP/IP Properties dialog box, you will see several tabs you can choose from, including IP address, bindings, gateway, advanced Windows configuration, DNS configuration, NetBIOS if used. Each tab controls the settings associated with a specific aspect of using TCP under Windows, and in the sections that follow you'll get a look at all the settings you can configure on these tabs. The settings that you use on your system will obviously depend on the configuration of that system and exactly how you intend to use it. And in certain circumstances, you may see other tabs in the TCP/IP properties dialog box. For example, if you are using NetBIOS, you will see a tab that lets you use NetBIOS over TCP/IP. Okay, the IP address tab. You can use the IP address tab to specify an IP address for this client. If you accept the default option, obtain an IP address automatically. Your computer obtains this address from the Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol DHCP server on your network from an ISP if you are connecting directly to the internet. You can read more about DHCP in the following DHCP sidebar. To remove an installed gateway, select it from the list in the Installed Gateways box and click Remove. The Advanced tab. You use the Advanced tab to specify that Windows should use this protocol as the default if no protocol has been selected. No other configurable properties are available in this tab. The Wins Configuration tab. Selecting Disable Wins Resolution in the Wins Configuration tab turns off the use of Wins. This is the default setting. If you select Enable Wins Resolution, you can enter IP address values for the primary WINS and for a secondary WINS server on your network if one is available. The system tries to use the primary WINS server for name resolution, but if it can't find the primary WINS server, it will try to locate a secondary WINS server. The scope ID field may contain a set of text characters if you have an inter-network connection that uses NetBIOS over TCP/IP. When all computers in a group share the same scope ID, they are able to communicate with each other, but not with computers outside this group. In most cases, the scope ID field is left blank. At the bottom of this dialog box, you will see the option button. Use DHCP for Win's resolution. Click this button if you want to enable DHCP to set up the Win's configuration. The DNS configuration tab. You use the DNS configuration tab of the TCP/IP properties dialog box to enable or disable DNS. When DNS is enabled, you can enter information into the host, domain, DNS server, search order, and domain suffix. Search other fields. The host field contains the name of the local computer, usually the name used to configure networking services, but it can be different. The name can include a set of alphanumeric characters and a hyphen, and a period is used as a separator. You know from earlier in this chapter that an FQDN consists of the name of the host followed by the domain name. For example, if the name of the local computer is Wallaby and the domain is cybec.com, the FQDN is wallaby.cybec.com. The domain field is optional and, if used, contains the name of the DNS domain to which this computer belongs. The DNS server search order field can contain the IP addresses of as many as 3 DNS servers that can be used for name resolution services. To add the IP address of a DNS server, type the IP address in the entry field, click Add. To delete an IP address from the list, select an IP address and click Remove. The domain suffix search order field contains a list of domain suffixes and the system can use that the system can use when creating a FQDN for a short time. The system adds the local domain name to the short name and queries the DNS server for name resolution. If the FQDN is not resolved, the system appends each successive domain suffix in the list to the short name and retries for name resolution. To add a domain suffix to the list, type the domain name you want to add and click Add. If you want to delete a domain name from the list, select it and click Remove. Windows Registry. All of this TCP IP configuration information is stored in the Windows Registry database along with lots of other hardware and software configuration information. You can change most of the TCP/IP parameters by using the network applet in Control Panel as you have just seen. Certain parameters, however, such as time to live and the default type of service, can be changed only by using the registry editor regedit.exe on Windows 7 or regedit32 on Windows 10. If you change some of these registry parameters without detailed knowledge of TCP/IP configuration parameters, you may affect the performance of TCP/IP on your system in an adverse and unexpected way. Virtual LANs. With the introduction of Ethernet switches and their subsequent replacement of Ethernet hubs in corporate LAN environments, came the power of came the power to manage traffic flow much more efficiently and in many different ways. One of those ways was to allow users on different switch ports to participate in their own network, separate from but still connected to the other stations on the same or connected switch. This network within a network concept became known as a virtual LAN VLAN technology. Let's say, for example, you have a 48 port Ethernet switch. If you have a group of users that constantly use a particular server and produce very large amounts of broadcast traffic, you might want to separate them into their own segments, but with VLAN capable switches, you are able to modify the segmentation within the switch itself, thus saving you the expense of additional network hardware. To do this, you would use the switch management software to assign the ports on which those users and their server were working to their own VLAN. The VLAN for this group could be VLAN 1, for example, and the VLAN everyone else is assigned to could be VLAN 2. Users would still be able to communicate with each other and their respective servers, assuming a router was installed, but broadcast traffic would be isolated. With large enterprise-capable switches, this benefit is realized even more so. With hundreds of ports, you can segment the network any way you'd like, even on the fly and onto and into many different segments. Summary: in this chapter, you learned about the basics and applications of the transmission control Internet Protocol TCP/IP suite. First of all, you learned how TCP/IP works and about the various parts that make up TCP/IP. Then you learned about the Transport Control Protocol, the first part of TCP/IP, and how it is used to transport data within TCP/IP. Following that, you learned how the network layer protocol is used. In addition to these two protocols, you also learned of the various application protocols like SMTP, FT, FTP, and HTTP, and how they worked. Relating very closely to that was the idea of ports and sockets for each protocol and how each port was mapped to a specific protocol or was specified for each. One concept that gives many people trouble is the concept of TCP/IP addressing, which was covered in this chapter for both IP version 4 and IP version 6. Also, those addresses must be resolved into friendly names, which was covered in the name resolution methods. Also, in this chapter, you learned how to configure TCP/IP on a Windows-based workstation and also the steps to do so. Finally, you learned about virtual LAN VLAN technologies and how they work within a network. So I hope you liked this video. Please consider like, sharing, and subscribing, and thank you again.